All right, let's dive right in. Today we're looking at Burkina Faso, specifically under Captain Ibrahim Traoré. The focus is this big push for self-reliance, especially in agriculture, and how our source material presents it as, well, a challenge to the old ways, the traditional dependencies.
Yeah, and our source for this deep dive is pretty specific. So our mission today is clear. We want to unpack the specific actions the source mentions, the results it reports, and importantly, the huge challenges Burkina Faso faces, but only based on what's in this material we have.
Right, and the way the source frames it is, well, it's quite interesting. You've got this young leader taking power in a country facing just immense difficulties and trying these really bold economic social shifts. The source really highlights it as a deliberate move, to break free from external influence, as it puts it.
Okay, so let's start where the source does. It notes Captain Traoré coming into leadership, officially becoming what the source calls the big boss on October 21st, 2022. And the core strategy, according to this video, is the Presidential Initiative for Agricultural Production. That's for 2023-2024. The idea is to really supercharge farming, fishing, ranching, the whole agricultural sector.
And what really jumped out at me from the source was the mindset shift it describes. This idea that before people thought certain crops just wouldn't work in Burkina Faso.
Yeah, that they couldn't thrive there.
But the new belief, the one being pushed, is everything grows in Burkina, everything works in Burkina.
It's presented as a direct challenge, isn't it, to those old perceived limits?
Definitely. And to back that up, the source talks about serious investment in equipment for farmers.
It does. It mentions an initial donation of 500 tractors, and then later another batch, this one including over 400 more tractors, 239 tillers, 710 motor pumps, and 714 motorcycles.
Wow.
And the value mentioned for just one batch, this was May 2024, was 78 billion CFA francs, which is significant.
78 billion CFA francs. Just to give people a sense, the CFA franc is used across several West African countries. Exchange rates fluctuate, of course, but yeah, 78 billion is a massive, massive investment in farm gear for a country like Burkina Faso.
Absolutely massive. And the source notes the government isn't just handing it out randomly. They're actively encouraging young people to form cooperatives. The idea being that working together gives them better access, makes better use of the equipment. Leverage, basically.
Makes sense. And the video points to some, well, pretty dramatic increases in production based on its reporting.
It certainly does. The source gives specific figures. Tomato production. Reportedly up from 315,000 metric tons in 2022 to 360,000 by 2024.
Okay.
And it links this directly to building the country's first 2 tomato processing plants.
Right, adding value.
Exactly. Then there's millet. That production, according to the source, just exploded from, get this, 97,000 metric tons in 2022.
Wow.
To 1.1 million metric tons in 2024.
1.1 million, that's staggering.
It is. The source puts it down to things like improved seeds and what it just calls farming goodies.
Farming goodies.
And rice production also up from 280,000 tons to 326,000 tons over the same period.
That millet number, 97,000 to over 1 million in 2 years. Does the source give any more detail on how? Beyond seeds and goodies.
Not a huge amount of technical detail. It really emphasizes the focused initiative itself, the provision of those inputs, the seeds, the equipment like tillers and pumps we mentioned. It frames it as a direct consequence of that concerted push.
Gotcha. Okay, so beyond the inputs in the new processing plants, the source also hits on water management. Critical issue. It points out this problem of not enough water reservoirs and existing dams being silted up.
Right, like one from 1962 in the Cascades region mentioned in the source, basically unusable now.
Yeah.
And the response reported. An instruction to revive older structures. It specifically mentions an organization called BA, which the source says built lots of dams back in a previous revolutionary time.
Interesting, bringing back old structures.
And also building new, small, local water reservoirs, the goal being continuous production. Not just relying on the rainy season.
It sounds like a multi-pronged attack then. Inputs, processing, water infrastructure. The source also mentions cotton processing expanding, a second plant, and a support center for artisanal processing.
Yeah, again, diversifying and trying to capture more value locally, keep more income with the farmers.
Makes sense.
And maybe the most ambitious bit in the food sector, the source details this plan to revive wheat production and processing.
Wheat. Cook.
The stated aim is basically, we don't need to import flour. We can grow and process our own wheat right here.
That's a huge statement on food sovereignty, isn't it?
It really is.
And this ambition carries over into investing in high-tech machines, too, for processing, preserving, packaging food.
Yes. The source lays out this really bold vision, Burkina Faso becoming a food basket of Africa.
Wow.
It even suggests they could potentially challenge countries known for that, like Tanzania.
And they use an example to illustrate why this is needed.
Yeah, a very relatable one the source uses. Mothers selling mangoes.
Okay.
And if they don't sell quickly, the mangoes just rot. There's no way to preserve them, process them.
Right, highlighting that need for infrastructure to prevent waste and add value.
Exactly. So it's about food security, but also about building domestic economic value.
Okay, let's look at that broader economic picture presented in the source. Farming's contribution.
Significant, yeah. For 2023, the source puts it at 16.33% of GDP. Industry was higher at 29.25%, and services the largest at 43.64%.
Standard kind of profile for many developing economies.
Pretty much. But the overall GDP growth reported in the source is notable. It jumped from $18.8 billion to $22.1 billion in just 2 years.
That's pretty solid growth reported there. And talking about economic shifts, the source highlights something really bold. It reports Traoré straight up told the IMF, World Bank, Europe, and America to keep their loans. Is that right?
And that's what the source claims, yes. And not just that, it also claims he even paid back everything Burkina Faso owed them.
Wow. That's quite a statement. It's accurate, according to the source.
It's presented as a very deliberate message, like Africa won't beg anymore.
Not needing crumbs, as the source puts it.
Exactly. And the source notes this is making Western powers uncomfortable. Watching their influence fade, scrambling to respond is how the source describes it.
The source also mentions other internal economic actions, like salaries.
It does. Cutting pay for ministers and parliament members by 30%.
Okay.
While at the same time giving civil servants a 50% raise.
Interesting contrast.
And it adds that Traoré himself reportedly still uses his old military captain's pay, not presidential perks.
So these internal moves, as the source presents them, may be aimed at internal equity, projecting a certain image.
Seems plausible. Leadership by example, maybe fiscal responsibility, that kind of message.
Okay, beyond agriculture, the source touches on boosting the wider economy too.
Infrastructure.
Yeah, building better, safer roads is mentioned, critical for connecting markets, and constructing a brand new airport.
And crucially, moves on natural resources. Gold. Yes, the source details nationalizing 2 gold mines and stopping the export of unrefined gold to Europe.
So keeping the refining process, the value add, in country. That fits the self-reliance theme perfectly.
Exactly. The source says they're setting up a national gold refinery. Expected capacity, 150 tons a year.
And gold isn't the only resource mentioned.
No, the source lists quite a few others, reportedly untouched largely. Zinc, copper, manganese, phosphate, limestone, diamonds, bauxite, nickel, vanadium.
So significant potential there, according to this material.
That's the picture the source paints, yes. Untapped potential.
Right. So we've heard about these ambitious plans, big investments, some really striking reported results, especially in farming, plus these bold economic policies.
Absolutely. But the source acknowledges this isn't happening in some ideal situation. Far from it. The source outlines the incredibly difficult context Traoré inherited. Huge problems with security, defense, healthcare, social programs, basic infrastructure.
And those challenges haven't gone away. They're major hurdles, right?
Yeah, huge. The source talks about ongoing political instability, violent extremism, weak institutions.
Terrorism is a major factor mentioned.
A massive factor. According to the source, it's taking control of about 40% of the country, forcing thousands of schools and health centers to shut down in those areas.
The human cost must be immense.
It's starkly presented in the source. Over 2 million people internally displaced, and a 35% jump in people needing humanitarian aid just between 2022 and 2023.
And putting this in that wider development context, the source mentions the Human Development Report.
Yeah, the 2023-2024 report. Burkina Faso ranks very low, 185th out of 193 countries on the Human Development Index, and 149th out of 167 on the Sustainable Development Goals Index.
So among the countries facing the most severe development challenges globally, access to basics like healthcare, education.
Severely limited for many. The source underscores it by noting that almost 2/3, 64.5% of the population are considered multidimensionally poor. It's deep poverty.
Yet despite these really deep systemic problems, the source does share a potentially hopeful economic forecast.
It does. From an Institute for Security Studies study, it suggests the economy could grow around 8% annually from 2025 right through to 2043.
8% annually, sustained over that period. That would be transformative.
The source notes the potential impact, maybe adding $1,120 per person, and critically lifting perhaps 2.4 million people out of income poverty by 2043.
Huge potential. But the source itself links this to governance, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It stresses that fixing governance, running the country better and cleaner, as it puts it, is key. That alone could unlock even more growth and poverty reduction.
How much more?
The source suggests good governance could add another $240 per person and help another 500,000 people escape extreme poverty. So it emphasizes reforms are needed everywhere. Security, accountability, public services, making sure things are inclusive.
And the source also brings up the political structure itself. Constitutional rule.
Yes, it highlights the need for a transition back towards constitutional rule and a stable political system for legitimacy inside the country and also for investor confidence from outside.
Shifting gears slightly, politically, the source mentions Traoré's popularity.
It reports an increase, yeah. Points to him getting loud cheers at an event in Ghana, an inauguration in January 2025.
Okay.
And it kind of speculates this might show a growing acceptance, maybe even appeal, of military leaders among young Africans.
Interesting angle. His age is also highlighted.
Definitely. 36 years old. Youngest president in the world, the source notes. Compares that to the African average leader age of 63. Suggests this youth might be part of his appeal.
But ultimately, behind all the policy and politics, the source brings it back to everyday hopes.
Yeah, people just wanting, better roads so they can get around easier, food on the table reliably, life just being a bit less of a struggle.
And the source makes an interesting connection between this agricultural push and wider African development goals.
It does. It links Traoré's actions to Dr. Akinwumi Adesina,
Head of the African Development Bank.
Right, and his Feed Africa strategy, which aims to end hunger, malnutrition by 2025 through investing in commercial farms, helping young entrepreneurs, fiscal oversight.
Right.
The source frames what Traoré is doing as fitting right in with Adesina's idea of massive industrialization by turning farms into essentially food factories, adding that value.
So wrapping up what our source material tells us, it paints this picture of Burkina Faso under Traoré, ambitious goals for self-reliance, big agricultural initiatives, moves in mining infrastructure, and these bold economic steps that seem to challenge traditional international ties.
Exactly. The source presents them as bold with potential, driven by this everything works in Burkina idea. But it's very careful to show this is happening against a backdrop of incredibly serious challenges: terrorism, poverty, weak institutions. These are massive obstacles. And it implicitly raises that question: can these state-led efforts be sustained? Avoiding the common problems, inefficiency, maybe corruption, messy management that often plagues state ventures.
It's definitely a complex picture presented in the source. So thinking about everything we've discussed from this material, the reported progress, the scale of those challenges, what do you think emerges as perhaps the most critical factor, the thing that will really determine if Burkina Faso can sustain this push and reach those goals? What stands out most to you from this source as the biggest question mark or maybe the biggest opportunity?